I am Joseph Peroni.
Heidi Mancini.
And you are tuned into VegasAllNetRadio.com. This is the From Grief to Relief show, and we are heard live every Thursday between 2 and 3 p.m. All of our shows are archived for later listening. You can also buy the From Grief to Relief book on Amazon.com.
Our mission statement for our show is to share life experiences, love and courage, and strength to face life and its challenges. Every guest shares their journey through life, hopefully helping others to realize we all face the same fears and challenges. With love, hope, courage, strength, and support, we can help each other live authentic lives.
Paperback writer.
I am Joseph Peroni.
And Heidi Mancini.
And we are now live on VegasAllNetRadio.com. So how are you this afternoon?
I'm good, Joe. How are you?
All right. Warm enough for you?
Yeah. It's nice out.
Anything new this week?
No, not really.
Sure there is. You got a new water heater.
Oh, yeah, we did. We got a new water heater. We have heat in the water.
Yeah,
no more floods out in the garage.
Yeah. All right. So with all the technology this world has, they don't know how to make a water heater that can give you
a warning,
like a little bit of a warning before it bursts and fills up your garage with water, with a drum set and everything else.
And everybody you talk to says that there's no warning. They just come home to a flooded house.
And here's another rule. We tried to get one off the internet, right? Mm-hmm. So you went Lowe's.
Lowe's, yeah.
Right, like on in one location.
Mm-hmm.
So idiot me. I go to the one that's closest to the gym, to get it installed, to handle all that. And they say I'm not allowed to do that. So they told me to cancel the order and to start all over again.
I know, it's asinine.
Yeah, well, you think it would be easy, but here's the thing. So I canceled the first order. Then I go to start the second one.
Yeah.
And my credit card was denied. So now we have a flood. They thought there was
some hanky-panky going on with the credit
card.
So
we got a flood in the garage, and they denied me, so I couldn't get. So the thing is, here's the rule: you cannot buy the same water heater in the same day on the same credit card, unless you're like a contractor or something. So they didn't believe me.
That's funny.
They said there was fraudulent activity.
So I'm sitting there. Yeah, but in a way that's kind of good though, Joe. Because could you imagine if it was somebody did steal your card or something?
Yeah, but I wasn't too thrilled with it at the time. So annoying.
I know.
Anyway, so that's the one bit of advice I have for today. I don't know how to get around that.
I don't either.
But yeah, don't use the same credit card.
Twice at the same place.
Yeah.
God, that's crazy.
All right, so here we are on the From Grief to Relief show. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, just a quick little thing here, because I didn't have enough time to actually prepare to do this, because it only happened, I think, I heard about it last night. The All-Star Rock and Roll Heaven Band, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They have a new member as of yesterday. Guitar player Alvin Lee from 10 Years After. He died, and he was 68 years old due to complications from just a routine surgery.
That's
now
scary.
You know why I was afraid of getting hip surgery.
Oh, yeah. But you're doing really good with your hip these days. You're walking really good.
It's perfect.
Walking the dogs, getting up and down the steps.
Yeah, it's
training your legs. Are you doing squats yet?
Not full squats, but pretty well.
That's good.
Yeah, so next week I'll be a little more prepared because I did not have Alvin Lee's music already lined up.
Mm-hmm.
But I will handle that next week. I'll do a proper tribute because I really liked Alvin Lee, and he was one of the stars of Woodstock.
Wow. Yeah, I never heard of him.
Great. You will by next week.
Okay.
So our music for today in the background, we have Tower of Power. They're best known for their jazz funk kind of sound, originally from Oakland, California. They've been performing and recording since 1968, right?
That's a long time.
Yeah, 45 years. So
that's
they've been
3
around
years
a lot.
before after we were born.
Yeah, I was born in 65.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah.
When were you born, Randy?
60.
You're the old man in the bunch.
That's when the Beatles came out. Yeah.
So you'd be 50.
You are 50.
Oh, wow. Well, that's okay. It's just a number.
So, here's what I was thinking about Tower of Power. This is really interesting. The Victor Conti, he's in that band. He's the bass. He was the bass player in the late 70s through the early 80s. But here's the thing. Okay, he also founded Balco, which is that Bay Area something. I forgot the whole name of it, but it's a sports nutrition center. Put it in quotes, right?
Okay.
It's just because he developed a steroid called the Clear, which at that time it could not be detected, through urinalysis or a blood test. So just so we know, I don't know if everybody knows it, but the steroid is a synthetic derivative of the sex hormone testosterone. Mm-hmm. Right? It's used to improve athletic performance.
Yeah.
So Victor Conti was a world-class bass player in a famous band, Tower of Power, right? Mm-hmm. During the night. And during the day, he was making steroids that could not be detected. Oh. So this one person almost single-handedly changed the landscape of sports for about 10 years. Because they said he had a lot of the guys from, his Bay Area, on the 49ers, on the Raiders, a lot of the guys, actually women too. I just don't want to mention any names because I don't know if that would be a nice thing to do. But a lot of women in the Olympics too were connected to him.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying what he did was good. I'm just saying what an interesting human being. When God gave out like talent.
Yeah, he decided.
I mean, what a mind. He's
steroids.
like a world-class chemist and a bass player. So I think that's very interesting.
Yep.
Speaking of performance-enhancing substances and athletes, I want to say a few words here about Lance Armstrong. I know it was in the news maybe a few weeks ago, but it's our time to bring it up here. I'm sure everybody knows him, but he's an American cyclist who won the Tour de France 7 times. Mm-hmm. And this, to me, is a true grief-to-relief story here. He was diagnosed with testicular cancer, which spread to his lungs and brain in 1996. Mm-hmm. So he had to go through a bunch of chemotherapy.
Radiation, probably.
And an operation to remove one of his testicles. That sounds not so good. But anyway, But here's the thing. He not only beat cancer, but he started the Lance Armstrong Live Strong Foundation in 1997, a year later. Then, here's the cool part. He went to win 7 Tour de France's from 1999 to 2005. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing. He started the foundation 2 years before he actually won.
Yeah.
So, in other words, it was on his mind to do something for people, even though his name wasn't that big yet. He was just happy to be alive.
Right.
So I looked this stuff up because I had no idea. But up to the present time, his foundation has raised more than $500 million, which goes directly to help improve survival rates and the quality of life for cancer survivors. So I thought, I'm not into money that much.
No.
So I don't know I'm not sure how much $500 million is. I mean, it's $500 million, so I wanted to put it in perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So here's what I did. I decided to take the country of that murderer guy, Pistorius, which is South Africa.
It is a piss. It's piss.
You're right. It was, by the way. I was wrong last week.
Because last week he said it was P-I-S, right? So it's piss.
Pistorius. Yeah.
Piss. Pissed.
So what I did was I looked up South Africa, and I looked up the gross domestic product, right, for South Africa, which, of course, I didn't know what gross domestic product was either. But here it is. It's the total market value of all goods and services produced in a year. So that means every man, woman, and child of what they produce in that country. And their population in South Africa is 49 million people, with the capital being a major capital of Johannesburg. Now, this all connects. Watch how I'm going to connect this. Their GDP, are you ready for this, is $411 million.
What's that? What's GEPD?
I just said it.
Wait a minute. Okay.
Well, maybe somebody else out there.
No, you didn't. Just say it again.
Maybe somebody else out there didn't hear it either. So let me go over this. The GDP is the total market value of all goods and services produced in a year.
Okay.
Now, this is for 49 million people, right?
Yeah.
Their GDP, gross domestic product, is $411 million.
Oh, wow.
So what this means is that Lance Armstrong almost single-handedly, by himself, has raised almost $100 million more than what a whole country makes.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that.
That's
And when you want to
crazy.
think about what he's done for the world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of numbers I'm looking at. That 20% more, by the way. Now here's another good part, or not a good part, but a very strange part in my sense. He was removed as head of the Livestrong Foundation because, now this is their quote, not mine, for lying, cheating, and that his story now loses all credibility.
That's stupid.
Now, let's go over this real quick.
I think that they're just singling him out, don't you, Joe?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that, number one, don't like him as a personal,
Probably.
as a human being. But I also think that there's a lot of people that like to tear other people down.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he did a few bad things. I'm not saying he didn't. But to say
But-
he's all bad. And where are all the other cyclists? You want me to tell you?
They're doing their
They're
stuff.
hanging out in the south of France, you know, lounging out, drinking wine, and you know what? They did not put a foundation together to save anybody
No.
other than themselves. And they're the first ones to jump on his back.
Exactly.
So, you know, I got to put that out there. But let me answer to these here. Number one, lying. You know what? He did lie. But you know what? I've been a personal trainer for 23 years. I don't know anyone in the fitness or the sports industry that doesn't have to lie to preserve a false image to the public. If they knew what goes on behind closed doors or in locker rooms, nobody would have any endorsements.
No.
I mean, half the NFL football players on the day of the Super Bowl are getting shot up just so they can walk to get out there.
Yeah.
And that's a little exaggeration, I get it. But, I mean, there's so much stuff going on behind the scenes, they can't tell the truth. You know, and when you watch things on TV like Bowflex, do you think that guy uses just Bowflex?
No.
So you have to lie. I mean, that's just the way the endorsements work. So yes, he lied, but you know what? Isn't it kind of extortion?
He's not the only person that's lied.
No, and it's kind of extortion when they decide to say, listen, I'm going to take away your livelihood if you tell the truth.
Right.
So that's a little. The other one, cheating. Here's a question for you. We know what cheating is, right? So we don't have to go over that. But is it cheating if the playing field is even and everybody is doing the same thing? Right? It's not. There's no way you can say it. Did he cheat, or was he the only one who was investigated? He was the only one who was one of the few that was investigated. Why? Because he won.
Yeah.
And I've got a quote from Floyd Landis, who was his teammate on the U.S. Postal team. I guess they sponsor the cyclists.
Yeah.
He said the entire U.S. team was on a systemic doping program, meaning you can't be on the team unless you're on the program.
That stuff.
And
Yeah.
they provided it for you. You had to do it. And they asked Floyd Landis if he would do it again, if he would take drugs again. His answer was, given the chance, I would do it again because you don't have a chance to win if you don't use drugs, because everyone is on
Stuff.
medication.
Yeah.
So again, why is he such a pariah here? Now let's talk about credibility for a second. We can always use the thought that, okay, he had maybe better drugs than somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, so let's take that out of the equation. Lance Armstrong still, when you get down to it, in 1996 was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, which did spread to his brain, spread to his lungs. And as of we're doing the show today, he is alive and healthy. So what part of that means that he's not a cancer survivor?
Right.
And if you want to say the drugs were a bad thing, I'm going to tell you that the drugs probably helped him. If you want to get down to it,
Yeah,
you know, if anything else. So I kind of don't understand any of that.
I don't either. But
Yeah.
I think they just single one person out. I do. Because anybody that has any intelligence, they know that a lot of the big leagues, they're doing it. I mean, you can tell by looking at them that they are.
Right, and the people who know are not allowed to say. You know,
And the
that's
other
the
thing is even with all the prescription drugs that people are taking, that are impairing them, they get behind cars and they're driving to their, to work, and they're on these painkillers and this depressant. They're doing this, they're doing that. I don't understand.
Yeah, I think
any
it's
of
just
it.
a big part of society today. And like I said before, testosterone is a male hormone.
Yeah.
It's not technically a drug anyway.
No.
But here's a couple of FYIs for your information.
FYIs. Okay.
Just a thought. Listen, if you're a man or if you're a woman who knows a man and you're in a relationship with a man, listen, if he only has one testicle, I think that man should have a free pass to take some testosterone.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you freaking kidding me? Like, They lost to a man with one testicle.
Exactly.
And I got news for you. The guys who had 2 testicles that lost to him actually have no balls at all.
Oh, good one, Joe. I like it.
Because there's no way you're going to lose to a guy with one testicle. And complain that he's using testosterone. He's the one guy out of all of that, all the group of wuss bags that there's there, that needs to be on testosterone.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right now, if I lose a testicle, I'm taking testosterone that day. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you now. As a matter of fact, if I don't, you need to shove it into my body as quick as you can. That is ridiculous. That's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Let the guy go.
Leave him alone.
He's given enough. You know when you say you've given skin in the game?
Yeah.
He's given a lot more than skin in this game. Let that poor guy go. He's given $500 million to people, and he lost a testicle along the way, and people are still on his back to get more.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me with that?
I know.
And just one more FYI. The average man of today has half the amount of testosterone of a man in 1940. Right? It goes by Well, I'll get to that, but it's nanograms per deciliter is how you do it. It usually goes from 200 to very low to 1,200 if you're a boy going through adolescence, right? Mm-hmm. So the average man today is like 300, 350, meaning that you need some help. The average man in 1940, the men who also won 2 simultaneous wars and is known as the greatest generation, by the way, are men, as an average, had 700 nanograms per deciliter of testosterone in their bloodstream. Wow. So, a man of today actually needs to take testosterone just to be the masculine equivalent of a man 70 years ago. Not better, not more, not performance enhancing, but to be equal of a man from 1940.
That's insane.
What do you think? And it goes through a lot of the environmental problems, and our food is just not as good.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, why is that?
I mean, that's a lot of it right there.
Yeah.
Pesticides, our water is terrible, all these things. So that's my rant for the day. So what we're going to get into, we're going to buffer this with a little bit of music here. And then we're going to get into our how to put the pieces together after infidelity. So the first song I'm going to play today is a song about keeping it real. I'm going to give you one of the lines from the song that I kind of like. It says, "Come on and love me, or let me go before I give it away." And I know that sounds hurtful to somebody, but that's real. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't feed your dog ever and your dog is starving and you have a next-door neighbor waving a hamburger, you're not going to, you got to understand that your dog is going to want to eat.
Right.
And so that means we cannot take our partners for granted. Mm-mm. That's what I'm trying to say here. I'm not trying to be mean. It's just, just being real. So this is a song by Roger Daltrey from the album Ride a Rock Horse. The song is called Get Your Love.
Get your love.
This is Joe Peroni.
I'm Miss Heidi Mancini.
And you're back listening to the From Grief to Relief show. That was Roger Daltrey. Did you like that song?
I did.
Do you know who else has a version of that?
I don't know, but I heard it.
Sounds kind of dancey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Believe it or not, the Pointer Sisters.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, the Pointer Sisters. Anyway, so we're back with, we're going to try to put the pieces back together and going to try to survive infidelity. Mm-hmm. You can get our other shows on the archives to see where we led up to here, because we had a lot of other information before, and I really don't want to go over that to bore everybody to death. Right, so let's start with this part. What I would like to do is put a face on some of the concepts that we had from the previous shows. Mm-hmm. And when I say also putting the pieces back together, I don't just mean for the couple, right? There's a family that's involved. A lot of times there's kids. Mm-hmm. And people don't know exactly what to do. They're not given the right information. And so we're going to try to help. So we're going to put a face on this. And here's how you don't do it, right? Just to start with that, because most people make mistakes. That's why we're here to try to help. And we all make mistakes. But my parents got divorced when I was 6. And you don't explain much to a 6-year-old. As a matter of fact, you really don't explain much at all.
Anything.
But there's 3 basic things that I got out of it. Number 1, my father cheated. That's like, you don't hear any nuance in that. That's what you're told as a child. My father cheated. Period. End of story. Number 2, you hear that my dad is 100% wrong. No other side of the story. You're a child, so you don't think to have another side of the story.
Right.
So that's what you grow up believing. And number 3, which is also a big deal, it's implied and said sometimes that all men are basically dogs or they're useless, which is not a good thing when you're a boy, because eventually I was going to be a man. So, you have that kind of hanging over your head. And so the result is that you look at your dad as the enemy, right? He's the one who's the devil who destroyed the family, everything else, without looking at any other things.
Right.
And, of course, it puts, let's say, a father, in my case, in a bad position, because how are you going to have a real conversation with your son when he's 6?
You're not.
You're not going to be able to explain anything. There is no side to the story. It's just the result. So that's what you have. And when you're young, obviously, you don't have the experience to see any sides, really. You just go by what you see or what you're told immediately, and that's it.
But even in defense to your mom, not for anything, but I don't think people understand the full thing about the cheating and all that, and people just know what they know.
Right. No, I agree, 100%.
And even to this day, people still don't get it, and there's still issues with communication and all that.
Yeah, I mean, just in case anybody's thinking that, I'm not trying to throw anybody under a bus here. I'm just trying to put a face on it, because my situation is it's very similar to many thousands, if not millions, of other people, and that's really the way a lot of these things are handled. And so my parents would not know anything any better. This is 40 years ago, and I'm doing this stuff now. And believe me, when I give this information out, even the information that we have given out, most people don't want to agree with it.
Do you want to know what my parents divorced over?
What's that?
Can I tell you?
Yeah.
You're going to crack up. Chicken wings and beer.
Well, you're going to have to do a little explanation on that.
Well, because my mother went through a phase and she wanted to go out and have fun and do things. She was finally working. They had some extra money. They weren't poor. And my dad was like, I already did that, done it, don't want to do it. So basically, but they didn't know how to communicate. And
right, so you're telling me that your mother wanted to go out and have some fun, and your father said no.
No.
And then your mother...
So my mom went out without him.
All right. Well, yeah, that's going to be a recipe, yeah.
So there was a lot of lack of communication.
So
they both were wrong. My dad was wrong and my mother.
Which goes to our point that 92% of infidelity is cyclical, meaning that both partners are responsible for the situation. Mm-hmm. So let's put that to the test without me trying to hurt anybody's feelings here, but let's just put it to the test, right? Mm-hmm. You got to be willing to bleed for your audience a little bit. Right. You got to put it out there. I'm not here to lie. I told you from the first day I got on the air I was going to be honest, so we're going to do it. Okay, so I asked my mom if she thought that my dad was unhappy or had any needs that were not being met, before the whole situation happened. Now, I'm asking as a 47-year-old man. Now, I'm not a 6-year-old boy, right?
Right.
Like, my thought process is going to be different. So, did my father have any needs that were unmet? Basically, that's the question. Here's the answer. Why should I care about his needs? That was the answer. Now, I don't need to discuss that much anymore to try to hurt anybody's feelings here, but you can understand why a relationship is not going to work when somebody says, I don't care about
Your needs.
his needs. Mm-hmm. Like, if you told me that, I'm not sure how much longer the relationship would last. And if I told you I didn't care about your needs either, and so it's really not going to work.
Right.
So, but they didn't have any guidance.
No.
They didn't. The people that they talked to probably were using very, simplified, older material and didn't really understand how to put things together. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to my father's new wife, by the way, but what I'm saying is that there was definitely no counseling going on back then.
Nobody went to counseling back
Right.
then, and nobody knew how to keep a marriage together. And I don't know about you, but during that era, it seemed like everybody's parents were splitting up.
So both people are wrong. So, and you can hear me on tape saying this. So I hereby forgive both of my parents for being human and for not knowing where to seek better answers and guidance and help. They absolutely 100% did the best they could with the capabilities and the resources that they had at the time. All right. So, phase one, let's put these pieces back together. Because I truly believe this, too. I believe that there's a 100% chance to put it back together if both partners are 100% committed to doing it. Right? So, we have to know what we're dealing with here, like right off the bat. So, let's look at the first one. I would say number one, type of affair. There's a few. Now, we have emotional affairs, we have physical affairs. Right, emotional being the harder one to get over. We have the one-night stand, which we all know what that is.
Yeah.
But that's an easier one to get over, right? Just a one-shot deal. But we also have situational specific. That's a little bit tougher because that might be when somebody goes away on a business trip and they find out that the person cheated. It's hard now when you breach that trust because every time that person goes on vacation, business trip, you might feel, wow, okay, I can't check up on that person. That person might be cheating. So that's a hard one to get over. Yeah, that's a little more difficult. That's why we are assessing this. The most difficult one is the long-term premeditated cheating. Basically meaning that you're having a relationship.
Right.
So that is really hard to get over, and you have to make sure that both partners want to. Another very big thing to know here. Was the affair discovered, or did the person confess? That's a big deal, because if they confess they were guilty, and it's a good possibility that they want to reconcile. Now it's both persons' choice if they want to reconcile.
Right.
If it was discovered, that's different because they might be sorry that they got caught, not that
they're sorry that they did it.
So you don't know. So that has to be looked into. Another very important thing is the level of marital satisfaction before the infidelity. In other words, is it an exclamation point? Like, in other words, they cheated, and it could be a passive-aggressive response, let's say, and they're looking for a way out. Like, they don't want to be the one to look somebody in the eye and say, this is not what it's cracked up to be. It's not going well. Our dreams together, it's not going to happen. So maybe somebody doesn't want to do that, so they do something, very uncaring by going out and cheating, and then they hope the other person catches them, and then they hope that the other person ends it. That's what some people do. But on the other side of the coin, it could also be a cry for help. And that's why this needs to be looked into. In other words, it could be somebody who is being emotionally deprived, and now they go out and they act out, and they're hoping in a way to say, hey, can you hear me now?
Right.
Are you willing to listen to me now? And they're dying to be heard. Typically what happens is that the person is not going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're going to dislike them, and they're going to emotionally distance themselves even more because of that action. That doesn't typically work, but it is a thing that people do. You see that it's like with your mother, right? Let's say I'm not going to say she did because I don't know, but let's say she went out and cheated, let's say. Mm-hmm. You might say that she cheated, and the next move was, okay, do you want to go out with me now?
Yeah, I mean,
I've been asking you.
That could have been, I
me.
don't know. But he still, was still adamant about, I'm not going out. He even took my mom's car from her. Like, that's going to stop her.
So he took the car instead of saying,
Right.
I will go in the car
I'll
with
participate. So, I don't know. That whole thing was messed up. It was a whole big pride thing with him and her. And, they had friends that were, like, egging him on. And, he's a jerk, divorce him. My mom's girlfriends that were single. Let's go out. Forget about him.
See, I bet you that kind of stuff happened to my parents, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because people tend to, they draw battle lines. And there's
Mm-hmm.
not too many people that try to bring people together. You know
No.
what? I just thought of something. The way people try to bring Lance Armstrong down, I think people are like that in relationships, too, a lot of times.
Well, yeah, because yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they just try to bring people down, or they don't do enough to help, let's
No.
just say.
But when they finally split up, all my mom's so-called friends, there was nobody around. It was like they were there to try to break up the relationship. But then when it was broke and people were going through hard times, everybody was gone.
Wow.
So it was a real reality check for my mom.
Yeah. So what we're trying to say here is there's a lot of things to assess. There's a lot of things to figure out here because not one affair is the same. They're all different. They all need to be looked into. It's a very specific, actually, it's a very difficult thing to put back together. But all these things, again, we always talk about communication is key. Things need to be talked about.
Yeah.
Now, that's phase one. That's the assessment. Now we have to get to the real, true work of it. And here's very important. If you don't have this, you're done. We need a commitment from both partners. The commitment starts with this. If you're a couple that wears rings, those rings stay on. There's no, I'm taking the ring off because I'm in an argument right now.
Right.
Or I disagree with you at 2 o'clock on Thursday, so I'm taking the
My
ring
ring
off.
is off.
And then I'll put it back on at 3 o'clock when we, handle our
Stuff.
grievances. It's not going to happen. You leave that ring on. That's the way it is. You're together, okay? Number one, no threats. You do not look at the other person and in the middle of a conversation say, you know what, I'm done. I'm leaving the relationship. You can't put the relationship on the chopping block for every single grievance you have. That cannot ever work in a relationship. Never, ever. Number two, you cannot be punitive. You might want to be punitive, but if you're going to make the commitment to stay together and to work it out, you cannot be punitive. The runaway dog theory. You ready? Your dog runs out the front door, going crazy. You can't chase your dog down, so you decide to go back home.
Right.
15 minutes later, your dog's at the front door. You open up the door. You have two choices. What are you going to do? Now, if you're a good dog owner, you pet the dog on the head and you
let
bring him back in
in.
the house. If you try to punish that dog by hitting him a couple of times, he's going to associate that house, that doorway, with punishment. God help you if he ever runs away again, because he ain't coming back.
Right.
So you welcome that person if that's what you want to do. There is no punishment, or else you end up punishing yourself. Another big, very important thing. You have to remove all restricted thinking. Restricted thinking is usually forced into us, or we accept it by society. Here's one I hear all the time. If there is any kind of cheating or infidelity, divorce is inevitable. It has to happen. If it happened to me, I would leave because that's a terrible thing, and I would just leave. It's part of my ego. You know what? Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't.
Right.
But most people, when faced with that decision, have to make their own decision and not try to use their ego and to try to act like they're something more than what they are to their friends. So, no, divorce is not inevitable after cheating. It actually can bring both people much closer together because it allows now for communication. And that conflict, wherever there's conflict, it always leaves room for growth. And that's a fact with cheating also.
Well, that was the thing, the conversation I had today, too, was about that conflict is a good thing.
It can be if both people are 100%
right.
committed and they know how to communicate,
Right.
that's why you would go to a counselor. Now, as I'm saying all this stuff, I really don't think it's possible for two people to put all this together by themselves. I do think they need an outside party to help them out
Well,
with
and
this.
the literature I read too, they said it usually takes several years for couples to recover. It's not
yes,
it's
because
not
you're
going to
building
be an
up-
overnight. 'Cause
right,
you have
'cause
to
you're building up
rebuild the
trust.
trust again, and the intimacy and all that. So the thing is with reconciliation, people need to be realistic that it's not going to be okay. I forgive you, and everything goes back to normal.
No, it's going to
takes
be
work.
It's work. That's why this part of the section is called the work, and it does take work. The next part I would say is that do not buy into the thought process that a relationship is a total failure if there's infidelity. It doesn't invalidate the whole relationship. I mean, I've known people that have been married for 10, 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden there's somebody cheats, and they're like, oh, the relationship was a big scam. Well, okay, you may have had kids. You may have had years of good times together. All of these things count. It's not like one
Right.
thing of infidelity invalidates everything. That's not true. You can focus on the positive stuff. What brought the two people together?
Right.
How many good things that they've done together? There's a lot more, so we do not have to focus on the negative. So we're going to take a little break here. We're going to play a song by, if you can believe this, it's a band called Rat, only because I feel like I don't want to have everybody feeling down here, so I want to get something that's a little more upbeat. But it does speak about the things that we are talking about right now and in our previous shows. This is a song by Rat, and it's called Lack of Communication.
Too many problems the world can't solve.
This is Joe Peroni.
This is Heidi Mancini.
And you are back listening to the From Grief to Relief show. How'd you like that song?
I like that song a lot.
It's from the 80s.
I liked it.
You can tell, right?
Yeah.
Hairband stuff. Okay, so we are back. We are trying to put the pieces back together after infidelity. Can you turn that music up for just 1 second? I like that part.
It's kind of jazzy.
Yeah, just for a second. It sounds kind of porno-ish.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Okay, I'm in the mood.
Okay,
Let's get
he's
back
in the
into
mood
this
now.
now. Yeah. Okay, so we are now in the process of the work section here of how to put all this stuff back together. Very important here, accountability.
You have to own your stuff.
Now, yes. Now, both, you ready? Both partners have to take full responsibility for his or her actions or inaction. 100%. Now, there's no rationalizing. There's no saying, I did this because you did this.
Right.
You know, I would have done this if you would have done that. None of that. No denying. As soon as you deny something, you say you didn't do it when the other person knows you did, you're
Right.
invalidating their whole experience. And now we have what we call an argument. That's not going to work. The other part of accountability, no blaming. You can't blame somebody for your actions.
Exactly.
You can speak to why you did what you did, but you can't blame somebody for what you do,
Right.
right? It's called accountability. Now, there's also no defending what you do. If what you did hurt your partner, you
You
can't
have to
defend
own it.
that.
You have
There's
to
no
say,
defending
"I'm
that.
sorry," and don't defend it.
Right. So you own your words, you own your actions, and you need to understand how your partner feels.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to defend. If your partner is hurt, and they will be, you can't defend. There's nothing to defend. They're hurt. It makes no sense to defend anything. So, do we have that? You got that?
We have that.
We have that. All right. Now, the one thing that should make this a little bit easier, even though it's very difficult, is that you have to remember that each partner has imperfections. Nobody's perfect, so it's okay to admit your faults.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a good human being to admit all their faults and where they went wrong and how they're going to try to make it better. You know, what's on, and the stakes couldn't be higher, by the way. It's your marriage.
Exactly.
So if you can't do this, then you're just telling your partner, listen, I would rather hold on to my stuff because my ego's too big, and I'd rather get divorced.
Right.
And I'd rather have that on me and feel guilty for the rest of my life and maybe hurt my kids because my ego's too big to admit that I might have done something wrong. Now, once we have that, we go to the next part. We need a full and open disclosure. Now, that's to each partner's satisfaction. Both partners have to fully disclose what happened and why they did what they did to the best of their ability. Part of this is called releasing the anger. This is the part where you have your right to yell, to scream, get it out, say every word you want to say. There's a great movie out. It's called Closer. I don't know how old it is now. It might be 7 years old, 8 years old.
Yeah.
It didn't get any popularity in the United States, and I'll tell you why. The director of that movie said, this is the greatest movie you've ever seen about sex and infidelity, but there's no nudity in it. So it was all about the mental aspect of it. And there's a great scene in it, and I'm going to use a little bit of it right now about disclosure. There's a part in there when I believe his name is, I was going to say Owen Wilson, but it's not. It's, I can't think of it. But he confronts Julia Roberts, who's cheating.
Yeah.
And they were married. And he starts to ask her questions. And one of the questions he says, you know, basically, did you sleep with him in our house? And she didn't want to answer.
Oh.
See, things like
see that
that.
movie.
And he started saying things like, did you do it doggy style? Did you have an orgasm? And you know what? Full disclosure. You need to answer those questions. Just for example, if you cheated on me, and I asked you, and I asked you, I'm just using an example. If I ask you, did you give him oral sex? And if you did, your answer needs to be yes. And if my next question is, how did it taste? I don't care how disgusting the question seems. You need to answer, because if I can ask it, or if anybody else has a question on their mind and it's not answered, believe me, that question's going to be on their mind forever. And they're going to make up their own answers. And it's going to act as a poison, and eventually it will kill the relationship. They need to have, this is also how you build vulnerability for both partners, right? And then you can answer all these questions. And this is how you start rebuilding your intimacy. So every question that needs or feels like somebody needs to ask it, that means that question needs to be answered to each partner's satisfaction. Now, if a person doesn't want to know anything, okay.
Then they don't want to know.
Then they don't want to know, and that's okay. So there's where you get a chance to release all your anger. Now, the formal apology. Both partners have to make a formal apology for their part in that situation. Now, what you're looking for here is that each person has to be very remorseful. In other words, again, they're owning their stuff. When you truly own your stuff and take full accountability, there's a guilt there, and you feel remorse for hurting another person that you love. We need to see remorse. Remorse for your part in this problem. You also need to show empathy. Empathy for your partner. Meaning, you need to understand 100% how your actions or inactions made the partner feel. Don't just say, well, yeah, they're sad or they're angry. You need to know why and to the depth of their soul how important this is. And when you can do that, the apology most likely will be accepted. Now, when it's accepted, we call that, what do we call that?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Now, when you forgive, what you're doing is you're acknowledging the past. Because you're forgiving them for something, right? So you acknowledge the past. But here's the big deal now. At this point, you are never allowed again to bring it up. You are not allowed to use it as a hammer on your partner forevermore. You cannot bring it up. You can't say somebody comes home, they late or they do something a little bit wrong, or you have a discussion, and then you say, oh, by the way, you did this to me. You're done. This right from here on, if you don't want to forget about it, then don't move on from this point. But if you go past this point, you are here and forever not allowed to talk about this subject again. So acknowledge the past, learn from it, grow from it, and then you let it go, which leads you to be open to the future. And then you move on. Right? Better than you were before. Now, we need a last part here, a shared voluntary commitment to rebuild the trust in the relationship, and also a shared commitment to rebuild and restructure the relationship. So in other words, whatever happened before, we may need to, or somebody may need to restructure. In other words, let's say somebody says, I would like you to be home more. I need you to do more work around the house. Whatever these restructuring things, or talk to me in terms of what you see and how you feel. Don't criticize.
Well, they say if the underlying problem doesn't get resolved, the cheating will occur again.
Absolutely. So I think what we did here was pretty much give an excellent diagram of how to do this. And if you want, eventually you get to go to the archives. And if you want, if I was going through this problem, and I heard somebody like us on the air, I would write this stuff down. Because I'm trying to actually do it pretty slow here, so you can, write everything down and take it all in. Because this stuff actually works, especially if you have the right mindset, that these things can be handled.
So communication is the key to all of it. Communication before the infidelity, communication during the relationship, and then, of course, if something does happen in the relationship after. And a lot of people don't know how to effectively communicate. So
Right.
I don't know if our show next week, if we're going to talk about that or not, but those are tools, too, that people need. Because people a lot of times say, what's communication?
Yeah, sometimes they think it's just talking back and forth. You know, kind of like a tennis match, you know,
Right.
here, and then you hit it, and then you hit it. And then when the other person talks, you're already trying to formulate your opinion
Exactly.
and to formulate what you're going to say. Or you're trying to think of ways to say, okay, you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the other person doesn't always have to be wrong, by the way.
No.
You know, if you see it from a different perspective, your opinion can be a certain one. And from where you stand and the way your experience is up to that point,
Right.
you know, so your opinion would be very valid. So both partners' opinions are valid. So that, you know, we talk about communication, it's to understand your partner from every point of view, not just the words they say, but the motivations behind it.
Because people form judgments and they have their own perspective based on their past, too. So that comes into play a lot of times, too, with people.
Right.
Like past experiences. Or,
Well, a lot,
or-
you know, we'll talk about that coming up, too, about
yeah.
how a lot of your past, you're looking through a certain prism. And when you're looking through glasses that say that you were hurt from when you were a child, you're already thinking through those,
Yeah.
through that prism there. And when someone talks, you're not really hearing what they're
No, they
saying.
don't. Uh-oh.
Okay, so hopefully some of this has helped you today. And we'll be back next week.
Yes, we will.
And I'm going to have some Alvin Lee music. I promised you that, so we will do that. We're going to do a good tribute to him.
The
And-
Grief to Relief book is available at Amazon.com.
Oh, that's
So
right.
you can
I
purchase.
need to sell that, don't I?
You can purchase Joe's published book. It's a journey to help people, you know, experience things and know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's an awesome read. So if you can do that, we appreciate your support with that also.
Thank you very much. My name is Joe Peroni,
Heidi Mancini.
and you've been listening to the From Grief to Relief show.
Views and opinions expressed on this program were those of the hosts and guests and did not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.